Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History. Today is February 14th, 2019, which makes it Valentine's Day. So welcome to our Valentine's Day special. If you are in a couple this Valentine's Day, I wish you a romantic evening. If you are single this Valentine's Day, have a date with me. Pour yourself a glass of wine, open a box of chocolates and kick back as we look at the glamorous Burton Taylor jewellery. I dedicate this episode, of course, to my own Valentine, my gorgeous husband, Rupert, and I wish all of you a happy Valentine's Day too. All right, I think love is in the air. History is full of legendary couples, some fictitious, some real, some a combination of both. Who do you think of? Tristan and Isolde, Abelard and Eloise, Romeo and Juliet, Edward and Mrs. Simpson, even though now we tend to think that she didn't really like him that much. Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, legendary couples. However, the most glamorous of these legendary couples is, without a doubt, in my opinion, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Now, you may remember in January's episode of What We're Into, I was really into Furious Love, this wonderful, massive book, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and the Marriage of the Century. I'm still reading it. It's like 600 pages long. It is impeccably researched, and I really have come away with at least a notion of what their marriage was like and what they were like as a couple. Undoubtedly, they had the passion and the fire and the romance of Antony and Cleopatra, but too often they also became George and Martha. And I think the reason for that is because there was an awful lot of this in their marriage. An awful lot of this. But there was an awful lot of this as well. A true tenderness and care for each other. And there was an awful lot of this. They both shared a silly and absurd sense of humour, and nothing made the other happier than to make each other laugh. I've often heard it said that when people get married, they should share the same values. Now, I always thought that meant kind of moral values or religious values. But I've since come to understand it simply means people should value the same things. And Richard and Elizabeth certainly did. They valued spending time with each other. They valued family. They valued animals. They loved their pets. They valued their friends. And they also really valued Bulgari, Cartier, and Van Cleef and Arpels. They valued beautiful things. Elizabeth Taylor loved jewellery. She had a very special and unique relationship with it. She even wrote a book about it, My Love Affair with Jewellery. Well, Elizabeth Taylor loved jewellery and Richard loved Elizabeth. So it's very natural that he would gift her with these incredible pieces. However, I think he was also sort of gifting himself as well. He was extremely proud that he was able to afford these beautiful pieces. He really got a kick out of competing at auction with Aristotle Onassis and winning. It was proof to him that he'd made it, that he was no longer the poor boy from the Welsh valleys, even though such a huge part of his shtick was being the poor boy from the Welsh valleys. But he got a kick out of making Elizabeth happy. She loved jewellery so much. There's a wonderful little passage in the book where they're in some hotel suite somewhere. She's in a different room, and he calls to her and says, "What are you doing, Lumpy?" That was his nickname for her, Lumpy. And she replied, "Just playing with my jewels." And she was, and they were all heaped up on her vanity, and she was playing with her jewels. So adorable. What a unique couple. So let's look at some of this legendary jewellery, starting with the first piece of jewellery that Richard bought Elizabeth. Ooh, it is this. It was purchased during the filming of Cleopatra in 1962 Richard and Elizabeth took a break from the set and went to Bulgari, where Elizabeth had already spent quite a bit of time and money. This, of course, is in Rome with Gianni Bulgari himself. This was the piece that Richard bought Elizabeth. It is a necklace and brooch set, and the brooch can be worn as a pendant. The necklace features 16 rectangular square-cut emeralds, each with a circular-cut diamond, spacebar marquise-cut diamonds, and pear-shaped diamonds in quatrefoils. The brooch was actually made earlier, probably in about 1958, and although legend has it that Richard bought Elizabeth the necklace and the pendant at the same time, it's probably more likely that he bought the brooch first and then the necklace. This emerald and diamond ensemble was part of a suite. Elizabeth already owned another brooch in the same suite that was given to her by Eddie Fisher. And so I think that maybe choosing items from the same range, more expensive items, bigger items, better items, was Richard's way of saying, listen, I'm better than the other guy. Because, of course, Elizabeth was still married to Eddie Fisher when she fell in love with Richard Burton, and Richard Burton was also married. Richard did not buy Elizabeth an engagement ring. That would have been very déclassé, considering they were both married to other people, but the brooch acted as an engagement ring. There she is wearing just the brooch in the movie The VIPs. Elizabeth often wore her own jewellery in her movies because, as she said, her fans wanted to see it. And there she is on her wedding day wearing a beautiful yellow chiffon dress by Irene Sharaff, and again she's wearing the brooch, and you can really see the size of it there. Just the scale of this jewellery is so remarkable. And there she is with the earrings, again they're part of the same suite, and the necklace with the pendant attached. Evidently, when they went shopping for this stuff, Elizabeth joked that it was really a bargain because she was getting 2 pieces of jewellery in one, a necklace and a brooch. Not that the Burtons ever economised. Elizabeth eventually went on to get every piece in the suite, including this rather incredible bracelet. And she kept it for the rest of her life. She really enjoyed her jewellery. She wore it. There she is as a much older lady, still glittering and radiant in her Bulgari emerald and diamond necklace. The first really famous piece of jewellery that Richard bought for Elizabeth was, of course, the Krupp diamond. He bought it for her in 1968. From Harry Winston. It is a 33.19 carat diamond, one of the largest in the world. And there's a wonderful picture of Elizabeth wearing the diamond. Now, there's a bit of a story behind this. Richard, as we know, he was often on the pop, and he wasn't always a nice drunk. He was going through a dark period, and the two of them were in a restaurant together, and he was being mean and kind of vicious to her, as he sometimes was. And she just said so sweetly, "Richard, hold my hand." And he said he didn't want to hold her hand because, quote, they were big and red and mannish and ugly. And Elizabeth, the next day, when he apologized profusely, said, "Well, perhaps you should get me a diamond to make my hands look less ugly." And this is the diamond he got her. He wrote in his diary that after making that remark, he was going to have to pay for it, and pay for it he did. It was one of the most expensive pieces of jewellery ever sold. It is an Asher cut, and it is absolutely beautiful. It is breathtaking. There was a rumour abroad at the time that this ring was so valuable that Elizabeth Taylor had to have her finger pierced for insurance purposes whenever she wore it. I have not found a trace of evidence that this is true. And again, this was a piece of jewellery that Elizabeth enjoyed and wore all of her life. Here she is, a couple decades after receiving the diamond, which is now called the Elizabeth Taylor diamond, and still enjoying it. Who wouldn't? And there she is in one of the ad campaigns for her fragrance White Diamond, and she is wearing it, the Krupp's diamond, now renamed the Elizabeth Taylor diamond. And that's the box it came in. Imagine opening that box and seeing that diamond. Oh, here is a beautiful picture of Elizabeth, and you can see that she's wearing the Krupp diamond, but what's that around her neck? Well, of course, her most famous gem, the Cartier diamond, which is now known as the Taylor-Burton diamond. Richard was particularly thrilled at the acquisition of this stone because he outbid Aristotle Onassis, and that really meant something to him. The ring is a spectacular 69.42 carats. Richard Burton joked that this diamond had so many carats it was almost a turnip. One of the provisions of acquiring this gem from Cartier was that they would get to display it in their stores in America for, I think, about 6 weeks before the diamond was shipped to Elizabeth. And here is a fantastic picture of throngs of people outside of Cartier on 5th Avenue, 6,000 people a day lined up to look at this diamond. I particularly love this picture because this Cartier is right on the corner of 5th Avenue and 53rd Street, which is where one of my campus buildings is. And so when I was teaching in the classroom in New York, I would pass Cartiers every day on my way to work and look in the windows and drool, which always sort of reminded me of the song from Camelot that Burton starred in the early 1960s. What do the simple folk do? The simple folk don't wear Cartier, they drool at it through windows. When the gem was shipped to Elizabeth, 3 men, security types, in identical suits carrying identical briefcases, were sent to 3 separate homes of the Burton Taylors to act as decoys. Such was the fear that this stone was going to get robbed. And that's how it arrived. That is the box that it came in. And just to give you an idea of the size and scale of this ring, there it is on Elizabeth's finger. It was actually uncomfortable for her to wear. It was just too heavy, so she and Richard Burton had Cartier design this pear-shaped diamond necklace for the gem to hang on. But she hardly ever wore it because the insurance was prohibitive on it. It was massive. Part of the insurance policy was that she had to be accompanied by 2 bodyguards every time she wore it, and that she could only wear it for 30 days a year. I'm just going to zoom in here. This is just the diamond chain it hangs on. Look at those diamonds, and they're not even the main event. She debuted the Cartier diamond at Princess Grace of Monaco's 40th birthday party in Monte Carlo. The theme was scorpions, and she has this beautiful scorpion encrusted cloak there. This was not a piece of jewellery that Elizabeth Taylor kept after her divorce from Richard Burton. She sold the Taylor-Burton diamond, and the proceeds went to build a hospital in Botswana. Well, I'm sure some of you recognize this piece of jewellery. Of course, the main event here is that perfect pear-shaped pendulous pearl hanging from the bottom of this incredible necklace. The pearl is called La Peregrina. It's 500 years old and was discovered in the Gulf of Panama. Peregrina means pilgrim or wanderer. It is a whopping 36 carats, and it was the largest pearl ever discovered at the point that Richard Burton bought it for Elizabeth. I guess they've discovered a larger one since. It originally came on a far simpler necklace, these little seed pearls, and there's Elizabeth wearing it in period costume. She was an extra in the movie Anne of the Thousand Days. Did you know that? I didn't until I read Furious Love. She wanted to be an extra for the fun of it. She wanted to wear her pearl in a period costume because the pearl was originally owned, evidently, by Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, and she also wanted to be an extra to keep her eye on Richard Burton. She eventually had a far more spectacular necklace designed upon which to hang the pearl, based or inspired by this portrait of Queen Mary. Now there's a wonderful story associated with this necklace that I think you'll enjoy and that I can certainly relate to. Soon after acquiring La Peregrina, the Burtons checked into a suite at Caesar's palace with all of their animals in tow. Elizabeth was getting ready for the evening and was still wearing her socks and slippers and putting her makeup on, and she put on her necklace, La Peregrina, and she looked down, and guess what? The pearl was missing. She absolutely freaked out and panicked, was too scared to tell Richard. She looked everywhere. She eventually took off her slippers and socks so she could surreptitiously walk slowly around the shag pile carpeting with her bare feet to see if she could feel it. She was utterly at her wit's end and terrified to tell Richard. And it wasn't just the value of the pearl, it was the history. It was the fact that it was one of a kind, it was irreplaceable, and she had lost it. And I can relate to the way she was feeling because of this ring. This ring did not belong to Elizabeth Taylor, although it certainly is spectacular enough, I reckon. This is my Christmas present from my husband. And here's a little GIF I made for you so you could see just how sparkly it is. It is from 1920. It is an aquamarine flanked with 10 diamonds on a platinum band. It was my Christmas present, and 2 days before Christmas, we lost it. I cannot even begin to tell you what I was going through. Not just because of the value, but because, just like La Peregrina, it's one of a kind, it's antique, it's irreplaceable. Miraculously, 2 days after Christmas, we found it. And here it is on my finger today with Django, who's modelling cat food on his nose by the looks of it. It is never coming off my finger again. That feeling you have when you think you have lost something so irreplaceable is awful. My story had a happy ending. Did Elizabeth's? Well, yes, it did. As she was crawling around on the shag pile carpeting, she heard one of her dogs crunching on a bone. She then remembered that dogs didn't have any bones. She went running to this puppy, carefully opened its mouth, and there was the pearl, completely unscathed. Come on, if that pearl could survive the reign of Bloody Mary, it could survive a little Shih Tzu puppy. And Elizabeth loved the necklace and wore it throughout her life. And there she is as an elderly lady, still looking radiant and beautiful with La Peregrina. I love the little story that accompanies Elizabeth Taylor's Burmese ruby ring, which is flanked by 8 diamonds. It was a stocking stuffer. Yes, a stocking stuffer. Christmas 1968. Richard wrapped it and put it in the bottom of Elizabeth's stocking. Then, with all of the excitement and mayhem of Christmas morning, with everybody and all the kids opening their presents, at the point when Elizabeth was cleaning everything up and throwing away wrapping paper, Richard realized she hadn't opened the ruby. She hadn't found the ring. And so he had to tell Liza, their daughter, "Go tell Mum there's another present at the bottom of her stocking." And she found it and, of course, was delighted. Just to give you an idea of how beautiful this ring is, take a look at the mount from the side, the rays. It is gorgeous, and Elizabeth wore it throughout her life. A jewel of this magnitude Richard would refer to as a bauble. Some bauble, right? This is another personal favourite of mine. It is known as the Knight of the Iguana brooch, even though it's not an iguana, it's a dolphin. Richard bought it for Elizabeth at Tiffany's in New York to celebrate the end of filming Night of the Iguana. She accompanied him to Mexico for the shoot and they had a wonderful time. They went to Tiffany just to have a little browse around, and when Elizabeth saw this, she said, "Oh my God, Richard, it's the iguana." And of course he couldn't resist buying it for her. It was designed by the legendary jewellery designer of Tiffany, Jean Schulenberger, which is not easy to say. I love brooches, and this is so spectacular, but what makes it even more spectacular is when you get a sense of the scale. It is utterly huge. And again, it was a piece of jewellery that Elizabeth enjoyed for the rest of her life. She didn't just acquire all of this fabulous stuff and put it in a vault or use it as an investment. These were pieces that she wore, that she lived with, that were part of her wardrobe. I love that. And here is a detail of the iguana brooch, so you can see just how beautifully it's put together. Look at that artistry, look at all of those scales. Oh, it is divine. And here is Elizabeth wearing the Night of the Iguana brooch in her hair. She often did that with brooches. I think the story behind this piece is so sweet. It's called the Granny Choker, and it's called the Granny Choker because Elizabeth Taylor became a grandmother at the age of 38. She was utterly delighted, but Richard was very sensitive to her feelings about her looks, about aging, about her perception of herself. So when she became a grandmother, he rewarded her with this beautiful choker from Van Cleef & Arpels. And there she is, looking radiant, wearing it. I love the lion's head with those emerald eyes. And of course, it came with earrings, which of course Elizabeth had to have. And there she is with her first grandchild. Talk about a glamorous granny, right? But my personal favourite of the Burton Taylor jewellery is this, the Taj Mahal diamond. It dates from 1621 and it was evidently originally owned by the father of Shah Jahan of Taj Mahal fame, who made it for his wife, Queen Mumtaz, who of course he built the Taj Mahal for out of his grief. That is the story anyway, although there has been questions raised recently as to the veracity of the story. But what is definitely known is that it comes from the early 17th century. It is a table-cut diamond with an inscription in Parsi upon the diamond which reads, "Love is everlasting." It is a diamond flanked by rubies on a tasseled gold chain. And that's the back of it, almost as beautiful as the front. And here's a close-up. I think it's exquisite. I absolutely love this. And so did Elizabeth. Here she is wearing it. He gave it to her for her 40th birthday, and there she is showing it off at her birthday party. She wore it throughout her life. There she is in the glamorous 80s. And here is Dame Elizabeth as an elderly lady shortly before her death wearing the Taj Mahal diamond. As I was putting this video together, I kept looking at photographs of the Taj Mahal diamond and I became a bit covetous. I thought, oh, I absolutely love the look of this, the colour, this really antique vibe to it. Now, all of my personal jewellery is antique, but I don't have anything that dates further back than the Edwardian era. And then, you know, you put something out there into the universe and magic happens. I woke up today on Valentine's Day and my husband gave me this. It is not as old or as antique as the Taj Mahal diamond, but it's certainly the oldest piece of jewellery I now own. It dates from the 1860s and is a micro mosaic brooch of a dove with daisies. And daisies were my late mother's favourite flower, so it is perfect. I'll zoom in so you can see it. Okay, it doesn't come from 1621, but 1860 was a long time ago, and it sort of blows my mind that I am now wearing a brooch that was originally worn by somebody who dressed like this. And there's just something about it that really does recall to me the Taj Mahal diamond. There's something about the vibe, and this is why I love antique jewellery, because When you own a piece of jewellery, even if it's a modern piece of jewellery, it is like love, everlasting. Clothes don't last forever, cars don't last forever, jewellery lasts forever. It gets passed down. Sometimes it gets sold and then it belongs to somebody else who might pass it down or might sell it. And even if jewellery gets lost, it's everlasting and it might eventually be found, like Elizabeth Taylor's pearl or my aquamarine ring or this ring, which is almost 2,000 years old. It's Roman and it was recently dug up in a British garden. Elizabeth Taylor had a wonderful attitude about jewellery. This is a famous quote from Liz. "I've never thought of my jewellery as trophies. I'm here to take care of it and to love it, for we are only temporary custodians of beauty." What does make me a little sad, though, is that at the Christie's auction of so much of Elizabeth Taylor's jewellery, much of it was bought by big business conglomerates and will probably just live in a safe somewhere and not be worn by a beautiful woman. And before I sign off, I just want to share something with all of the UFH family because I think you'll really enjoy it, as well as my beautiful Victorian brooch. Just as I was putting the narration on one of the earlier slides, there was a knock at the door and a delivery guy was there with a beautiful bouquet of white roses from Rupert, and this was the card. You'll love it. Passion is not an island, it's a response. See why I married him? So perfect. Well, I hope you enjoyed this romantic episode on the Ultimate Fashion History. You can contact me through my website, amandahallay.com. Let's share that love on the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group. Love reading? Then check out our books at our publishing company, Dean Street Press. I'll be back very soon with more on the Ultimate Fashion History, so just click that little circle to subscribe. And until then, happy Valentine's Day.